Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's a white hat day, so it's going to be a good day.
Vince is fired up when he rocks the white
I know.
hat.
I got the white hat out. I'm ready to roll. Wore it on date night last night, so I'm feeling good. So anyway.
It's not our business, Vince. This is the time and the place for that, buddy.
We went and saw Elvis. It was a good movie.
Okay.
All right. Anyway, so welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That guy right there is Brian Driscoll. And today we are going to start a two-part series, and it is going to be about the Notre Dame schedule for the 2022.
What? We're not talking about recruiting and quarterbacks?
No, we're not. We're not going to talk about that today.
Okay.
And
good.
Tomorrow is the mailbag, so people can ask that question then.
Oh, dude, really? Why'd you have to put that out in the universe? Why'd you have to do that?
Because you know it's going to come whether we tell them not to or not. So, but today we're going to rank the Notre Dame schedule, okay? And we are going to start at the bottom, and we're ranking them 1 through 12, but we're going to go 12 to 1. And Brian and I, we know ourselves, and we know how the IB Nation is, and if we tried to cram all 12 into one show, it wouldn't work. It would be a 5-hour show. So we decided to cut it in half, and we're going to talk about teams 7 through 12.
The fact that we thought we could cover 12 opponents in an hour.
Yeah, I know.
It's just like,
what are we thinking?
No.
What are we thinking here?
Let's make it 2 shows.
Right. So we're going to talk about teams 7 through 12 today. We're going to start at the bottom and work our way up. And this is the way. So to peek behind the curtain a little bit, right? I put my ranking together. Brian put his ranking together. And then we kind of took the average and we melded them together for an IB ranking.
And explain what it means by ranking, because it's not just 12 ranking them in ranking of like who's the best team and who's the 12th best team. So explain what we mean by
there's a lot of things that go into it, right? There's where the game is going to be played. It is matchups for Notre Dame. Where and when, for example. Yeah. So if
is it
USC was coming to Notre Dame,
2 tough games, all that stuff.
Right. All of those things went into consideration for our ranking. And I will say this. When you put Brian's and mine right next door to each other, we have the same teams 7 through 12. It's just they're in a little bit of a different order, but not by much. It's like one spot here, one spot there, etc. So we were actually pretty close, which is good because we
had the same bottom 6 and the same top 6.
Yes, absolutely. So which is great. And I'm actually excited for both shows, but to see where your top 6 are.
Yeah, and I was tired of Vince's disrespect of Marshall, so I had to bump them up the list.
Actually, they're about the same. Well, if we average them together, maybe not. But yeah. I will say, and we will get to Marshall, but not for a while.
I have a feeling this is Garen's wife.
That is awesome.
We're sorry. It's all our master plan to recruit you as well to join our team. So, when the wife jumps in and calls you out on in the chat, it's time to put IB down.
It's time to push pause.
Come back later, buddy.
Yes, I know. And I will say, we were driving to our date last night, and I flipped on Sean's show for a second as we were driving. I wasn't driving; I was the passenger, and my wife just gave me this look, like, "Really?" I'm like, "I sorry." So yeah, I'm the same way, people. So don't feel bad. Do not feel bad at all. All right, here we go. So let's jump right into this, Brian. We're going to start at the bottom. Like we said, we're going to start with team number 12. Somebody had to come in 12th. It's no disrespect, but it is what it is. And that team is the team that Notre Dame will face on October 22nd at home at Notre Dame Stadium. And that team is UNLV.
Yes. And, I'm kind of looking at the schedule and how it shapes up. They're playing UNLV, in my opinion, first of all, at a really good time. And that, to me, obviously is important because it's kind of right in the middle of the season. They're playing them right after Stanford, right before Syracuse. And all 3 of those teams are going to be in this part of the breakdown.
It is
and the reason that matters is because you're going to have a pretty decent first 5 games. You play, obviously, Ohio State. You're going to play North Carolina on the road. You're going to play BYU in a neutral field. So you're going to be away from home quite a bit that first 5-6 games. So then you get 3 straight games, 2 of them at home, and then UNLV sandwiched right in between Syracuse and Stanford. So any advantage that UNLV might get about sneaking up on Notre Dame or anything like that is it's going to be it comes at a good time for Notre Dame.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yes.
And
So
go ahead.
Go ahead, Vince. No, it's
No,
good.
I was just going to say it also UNLV is obviously a group of 5 team, right? They're not a Power 5 team, so that has to be taken into account as well. Even though I really kind of dug into the numbers. That was one of the ideas one of the ways that I kind of used to rank the teams. Okay, and their numbers aren't the worst of everybody on the schedule. They're not the worst. But you also have to take into account the competition that they play on a regular basis as well. So that has to be factored in. But they still fall down for me. Now, a point that you made during our little pregame show talk was that they did get a lot of transfers in. And so that kind of gives a little bit of a question mark about kind of who UNLV is going to be. They brought in some talent on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's not. You look at them, so it's not going to really do a whole lot. And when I talk about getting Notre Dame at the right time, it's more about making it a game where it's like Ball State a couple years ago, Toledo last year. Notre Dame's going to win. It's just, do you have to keep your starters in the game a little bit longer than you should?
Right.
And that's kind of where we're getting at. And that's where I think the timing of it is pretty good for Notre Dame, because if you're able to handle your business, you're going to be able to sit guys at a time when you've got a pretty rough stretch coming up. So when you look at UNLV events, they went 2-10 last year. They're just not good. And Coach Arroyo's done some nice things. They got, like you said, a lot of transfers, but they went 2-10. They averaged 20.8 points per game. They gave up 32.8 points per game. And so, I mean, it's not even like they were overly competitive.
Right.
Except there was a game I did watch them once last year, as far as just like watching the whole game, and they played Fresno, and they lost 38-30. They gave Fresno a game. They played Texas San Antonio, who was a pretty decent team last year, lost by a touchdown. So if you look at UNLV, they actually had some competitive losses last year, lost by 8 to San Diego State at home, lost by 7 to San Jose, lost by 4 to Utah State. The other games we mentioned, lost by 2 to Eastern Washington, an FCS team. But they're just not good. Now, the good thing is they, like you said, they got some transfers in. They got Harrison Bailey, who's a former top 100 quarterback who signed with Tennessee and got beat out by Hendon Hooker last year. So he transferred there. They got a receiver from Michigan State named Ricky White, who transferred over. He has 10 career catches for over 200 yards. We were talking, Vince, I think he had something like 8 catches for like a bunch of yards in an upset win over Michigan in 2020. So, I mean, he's a kid that brings some big playability to them.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but they also return a lot. They return 7 starters on both sides of the ball. So they're going to be better. And I think Coach Arroyo's doing some nice things there. But them being better is a whole lot different than them being good. And that's the reality of it. They're going to get better. It's just, if you're Notre Dame, this is one of those games where you've got to come out and be Notre Dame and make them remember their UNLV and get this sucker over by halftime.
And it's your home game. I mean, it's in October. I mean, it's the prime time to have home games at Notre Dame Stadium with all the ambiance and everything that goes on. And then you just need to take care of your business. I mean, this is a team that should not put up much of a fight against Notre Dame, and you can't overlook them. I mean, you can't overlook anybody on your schedule. That's not. I would never say that about any team. You can't overlook them, but you need to go in there and you need to take care of business. And then, of course, it's an opportunity also fairly deep into the season where you can go a little bit further into your bench and you can get some more reps and you can try out a few things and you can get yourself right moving forward. Because look, middle to late October, Brian, there's going to be a lot of guys nursing some injuries.
Right.
Just
that's called football.
The nagging, they're hurt. They're not injured. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so there's an opportunity there to kind of, okay, we're going to work with that. We're still going out and playing our game. Right. But maybe there's not as many reps for some of these guys that might not be 100%, et cetera. So it's not a situation. I don't want people to think I'm talking about Ball State of a few years ago, where that's like the goal. Like you practice all those guys,
and then it ends up not turn out that way because you didn't prepare the right way. It's about prepare the same way,
absolutely.
But then maybe we're working it, because this is also the interesting stretch of the season, Vince, where your team for November starts to take shape.
Exactly,
and games like this can be part of that. So let's just say hypothetically, Tobias Merriweather gets some time, but he's not like a big part of the rotation early just because it's like, hey, we got to win this week.
Right.
This stretch that begins with Stanford and ends with Syracuse and has UNLV right in the middle is kind of that time where you can see that break out a little bit.
Yes.
And we saw that with Chris Olave at Ohio State a few years ago, Vince. If you remember when he broke out for Ohio State, he did almost nothing early in the year. He had like a couple mop-up minutes. And then late in the year, he started getting a little bit more action and started getting a little bit more playing time.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, he comes out at the end of the season and he goes off. I mean, he had one catch in the opener, mop-up duty. He had one catch against Tulane a month later, mop-up duty. Then all of a sudden, he catches 2 for 41 against Michigan State, plays more snaps, makes a catch and plays more snaps in a close win over Maryland. So clearly, these aren't mop-up duty minutes anymore.
Right.
And then, boom, he busts out, with 2 touchdowns against Michigan, and he breaks out with 5 catches for 79 yards in the Big Ten title game against Northwestern. So this is the stretch where you can maybe get some extra reps and some opportunities for some of your younger players that are part of your depth chart, to where not only are you giving them a breather at that point in time, but you're also now expanding your potential to expand your rotation a little bit, because you do have a stretch of games that are very winnable. Because what you got to be careful of is that if you early in the year, if you try that against Marshall and Cal, well, you're still building your team from a starting standpoint,
figuring out who you are and all of those different things.
And you got to get yourself ready for North Carolina and BYU.
Yes.
Now that's kind of been established. Now it's like, okay, this is a chance for us to get so-and-so a little bit more time early, or not just in second half, but early.
Right. And I really like you said, this stretch of 3 games, Stanford, UNLV, Syracuse. And you said it earlier, all 3 of those teams are going to find their way into this show. Okay. So, not to break any news here, but those 3 are going to be on this end. Okay. And this is where the second half of the season starts, right? This is, you're well into the season. You are, and then you've got these 3 games where, that you can call them get right games. You can call them expansion games, as far as expanding your depth chart a little bit. You can find out who's who.
Right.
Who's going to be able to help
this
you
game
in November.
especially? Yeah, that's the thing. When you look at UNLV, that game especially needs to be that kind of game. That needs to be your get right game. Yes, if we're going to be honest.
Absolutely.
So that's UNLV. Again, we can dive. We could dive into like a specific matchup. We'll do a little bit of that as we get closer to the season. We'll dive into each opponent, but we're just going to kind of give a brief overview and kind of talk more big picture like we just did.
Yeah, and I want to make sure people understand that we're going to do opponent previews, and we're going to spend, a whole show talking about the opponent, right? But this isn't that show. This is just ranking the opponents based on some things, and we'll dive in a little bit, but the more in-depth digging will be in the future. So I just want to make sure we put that out there so people aren't upset that we're not, really digging into.
So let's go next.
Yes.
Let's go to number 11.
So the number 11 team is obviously a team that you and I both have a tremendous amount of respect for, a team that we never want to see off of the Notre Dame schedule. But the bottom line facts are they have not been super competitive over the last couple of years. And it's been, to me, that's disappointing, because I feel like Ken Niumatalolo, or however you say his name, I apologize,
Niumatalolo,
if you're watching.
See, I got that one right.
Yeah, you can nail that. I always have trouble with his. I don't
saying
know why.
it for a decade.
I know.
DJ Uiagalelei stays as long as Hunter Renfro did. I'll probably have his name down too by the time he's done.
Good call. but I like Coach Ken. I like what they do over there. I think he's stayed when he could have left, which I give him a lot of props for. And it's been unfortunate that they've kind of fallen on some hard times here the last few years, and they're just not the competitive team that they've been in the past. And to me, that's disappointing. I like
it's not to me.
I like when Navy's competitive.
I always want to play Navy. They're never going to come off the schedule, but I do want them to stink. I'm not going to lie to you, because it is a draining game.
I want them to
stink. When they're really good at what they do, it can be an even more physically draining game. I mean, look, I don't want to dismiss that playing a triple option team is not draining it. You see it. I mean, you go into the training room the Monday after you played Navy, and all your D linemen get an ice baths. I don't know if that's still a thing, but whatever the modern equivalent of that is.
No, it's a thing.
Is it at Notre Dame? I don't know if they put them in some chamber that heals them from the triple option or something like that.
Heals them from the triple option.
Whatever.
Okay, that's funny.
But
that's funny.
I mean, it is a rough game, and when they're not good, 2 things happen. Number 1, they're not as good at doing those things, if we're being honest. And number 2, you're out by halftime, and we've seen that a lot more recently. And you look at Navy last year. They were a 4-8 team, and really their offense has really been the problem. They've really struggled on offense in recent years. They just haven't been able to score, because honestly, the last few years, they've had a hard time finding a quarterback. And here's the secret for Navy, right? And it's the worst kept secret in the history of football.
Okay.
When they got a dynamic trigger man at quarterback, they're really good.
Yeah.
When they don't, they're not good. And, Ricky Dobbs, when he was there, Navy was good. Shocker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And, you couldn't, the fullback did it is all because of Ricky Dobbs, right? Keenan Reynolds,
Absolutely.
Will Worth.
Absolutely.
When they haven't had guys like that, they haven't been good. And the other thing too is ever since their longtime D coordinator retired, their defense has taken a big step back.
Yeah,
they're just not the team that they were on defense.
And that feels like the hardest part about being at Navy is defense. You know what I mean? Like that's really defense. You can manipulate some things offensively to hang in there with people, but defensively, we talked about it. You need dudes on defense to be good at defense, and it's really hard to get those guys at Navy.
Yeah. So I don't, and then you look at it too, Vince, their top 3 rushers are gone and they lose 4 starting offensive linemen and their quarterback's just not dynamic. He had like 300 some rushing yards last year, averaged like 2.2 yards per carry, something like ridiculous like that. The triple just doesn't work if you don't have a weapon at quarterback. And I don't think the kid they have now is a weapon at quarterback. So I think that's really the issue. And Notre Dame didn't play well last year against him and still ran him off the field. It was pretty easily. And it was just another example of how Notre Dame was able to destroy teams despite not playing. If you go break down the film, Notre Dame didn't play well that game. We just had better players than Navy did.
Sure.
By far.
Absolutely.
And that was true almost every game.
Yeah.
I thought they played really well against Georgia Tech. I thought they played pretty well against Stanford for the most part. Other than that, I just didn't think they played very well.
Okay.
They just were way better than the teams that they played. And they did some things schematically and all that kind of stuff. But they continue to prove. But Navy is, that's another game where you look at it and you say, another reason I want them to stink, Vince, is because they do play. And this is one of the reasons I considered moving them up higher than list. Is because of when they play them. It's right between Clemson and Boston College and USC.
That's the definition of a trap game.
Right. I hate playing Navy late in the season.
The problem is, for me, and playing where they're playing, you can erase the name of the team and you put them in that slot, and that is a trap game for Notre Dame. Like that, bottom line, right? The problem for me with it being a trap game is that it's Navy, and they just haven't been very good. You know what I mean? Right. And that's the biggest issue for me. Navy-wide, it's just it's less of a trap game because they're just not very good right now.
Right, but it's this year. It's good that they're not good. That's my point because it is sandwiched between Clemson and BC and USC, and I want to get my starters out of there if I'm Notre Dame's coaches by halftime. And
if you take one of these, maybe a couple of these other teams, and put them in that slot, I'm more worried about that being a legit trap game. You know, does that make sense? Like it just Navy's doesn't scare me anymore. They should have never scared you. That said a whole lot more about Notre Dame than Navy. That's fair.
The point of it, however, is the timing of the game is the thing that concerns me the most. It's right after Clemson. You're either going to have an emotional win or an emotionally painful loss.
Sure.
Either one. And then if you're not ready to just reload right away against Navy, then you run the risk of this being a 4-quarter game. And I don't want any of my linemen in this game for 4 quarters there. And that's where we're at.
No, that's fair. Moving on to team number 10 on our list, Brian. And team number 10 falls early on in the season for Notre Dame. I believe it is week 3, excuse me. September 17th at home, second home game.
The green game.
That's what I wanted.
It's the green out.
Yes, it's the Irish
wear green. And the team is actually going to wear green.
That's great.
Imagine that.
Still love that video.
That was great, wasn't it?
Yes, it
was. Hey, Bass. Yeah, it was great.
Can we wear green jerseys? That was awesome.
Really good.
Freaking awesome. Okay, really so we're talking about Cal, and this is, I don't know the series history, but it's the first time they played Cal in a really long time. I don't remember them playing Cal, and I've been watching Notre Dame pretty consistently for a very long time.
It's not often, but I'm pretty sure they have played.
I'm sure they played them.
Could be wrong,
but yeah.
They have played 4 times in history, Vince.
Okay.
And Notre Dame, not shockingly, is 4-0. And they played a 4-game series. Basically, they played in 59 and 60, and then 65 and 67.
Okay. So that
Notre Dame won 28-6, 21-7, 48-6, and 41-8. So
my memory is not failing me in this instance.
They have not played in your lifetime.
Okay, fair enough, or yours for that matter. You're a spring chicken too, buddy. So. Excuse me with the but we're talking Cal here. Cal is, I mean,
let's do the resume, right, Vince? 5-7 off of last year, right? And they were competitive 5-7 at times. 23 and 8 points per game on offense, but 22.3 points per game allowed on defense.
Their defense.
Justin Wilcox is their head coach, very good defensive coordinator. The thing is like Cal, if I just base it off of last year, Cal's up higher because, like I said, they were 3-7 last year, but they were a quality. I mean, excuse me, they were 5-7 last year, but they were a quality 5-7. You know, they played good defense. They lost to Nevada by 5. They lost to Washington by a touchdown. They lost 21-6 to Washington State. They lost 10-3 to Arizona, right? I mean, like, you look at their schedule, and outside of they lost by 2 to TCU, 7 to Oregon. Outside of a late season blowout loss to UCLA, they were in every game for the most part. It just, the problem is they have no offense. I mean, they scored 17, 24, 6, 17, 3, 14. And even in some of their win, I mean, how many teams win multiple games scoring in the 20s?
Yeah, right.
And that happened to them last year. You know, end of the season with a good win over USC. The problem is here's what I like about Cal. I like Justin Wilcox as a coach. They're very disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
They're tough. They're physical. They don't make a lot of mistakes. The problem is they just have almost very, very little talent. Marshawn Lynch and Javid Best aren't walking through that door, right? Aaron Rodgers is walking out of the tunnel.
Aaron Rodgers. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Deshaun Jackson's not returning a punch for them right now. I mean, this is just a team that just doesn't have a lot of talent. And not only do they not have a lot of talent, they only have 3 starting offensive players and 4 starting defensive players coming back. And so only 1 skill player coming back on offense, and it's their running back. And they lost their quarterback. I mean, they lost a lot. And, you know, it's just – they're going to struggle. I mean, I'm looking at their starting lineup and like project starting lineup. It's like freshman.
Whew.
Like it's and the quarterback they're getting back is the kid that Notre Dame is familiar with. It's Jack Plummer, the kid that transferred in from Purdue, and we saw what Notre Dame did to him last year with David Bell and the guys he had around him at Purdue. So it's not going to be a pretty game. I mean, Notre Dame could score 24 points and win by 3 touchdowns in this game. I mean that's. Their offense is bad.
Right. It's their defense.
Yeah.
I mean, if Cal has a calling card, it's their defense, but they only have so many of those guys coming back, which is obviously a huge problem.
And all of their returners I mean, they have 1 guy coming back from their front 7.
Yeah.
1.
And there you go. I mean, if you're looking at last year's numbers, they were top 50. They were top 50 defense. They were 32nd in scoring defense and 48th in total defense. And that's okay. I mean, that's pretty good playing in the Pac-12. You know what I mean? Because teams like to score, et cetera, et cetera. That's pretty darn good. And that's why I actually had them a little higher. But I understand where you're coming from when it comes to guys coming back and the transfers and the young kids. And there's just a ton of question marks when it comes to Cal. And on top of that, it's a home game for Notre Dame. They match up really well against Cal across the board. I mean, again, we're splitting hairs here. They're still a double digit on our list. I mean, they're 10th on the list. I mean, it's not a whole lot of, they couldn't get much worse. So we're splitting hairs, but at the same time, you got to give them a little bit of respect because they still have, I believe they still have the same coaching staff, right? So
yeah, I mean, Peter Sherman's a quality defensive coordinator, in my opinion. He's their defensive coordinator. I said I like Justin Wilcox. Bill Musgrave's their offensive coordinator. He's been around a long time. Problem is he's a pro-style guy. And the problem with pro-style guys is you need players,
right?
And Chase Gerber's left, so I mean they're in trouble. And we'll see how Notre Dame is emotionally, and it makes sense for this to be the green jersey game since they're not their jerseys are kind of, their colors are somewhat similar to Notre Dame's, not exactly. I mean, different yellow and all that, but they're navy and gold.
Yeah.
And, now you're going to stand out a little bit more. So and they're going to. I mean, it's interesting. We'll actually get to see 2 of these teams that we've talked about already play each other the week before. Because UNLV travels to Cal, so we'll get to watch those 2 teams play the previous week. But I mean, ideally, you think Cal's going to be 2-0. They start off with UC Davis, and hopefully can win that one, and then play UNLV. But this should be a game that Notre Dame rolls. But the one thing I like about this game, Vince, is I like the fact that you are going to have to play a pretty decent defense. They're going to be physical. Again, they're just not talented, but they're going to be well coached. They're going to be physical. This is going to be, in my opinion, one of the better schemed defensive teams on the schedule. And so that'll be a good test for Tyler Buchner as well, as Notre Dame looks to kind of get back on track after whatever happens in the opener, one way or the other. It's either, you're bouncing back from a loss, or you're trying to find your footing in this emotional win where you've got to say, okay, that's Ohio State's behind us one way or the other. It's time to focus up.
Yeah.
And, Marshall and Cal, to me, the reason I like them back to back and well, let's go to Marshall next, because then I can talk about how they're also back to back in our rankings.
Yes, they are.
But anyway, let's transfer to Marshall, who's number 9.
Yes, so Marshall's number 9. It is Notre Dame's second game of the season, week 2, obviously, first home game, and the Fighting Kane Maddens. I didn't have a whole lot of respect for them coming in, but then I started to dig into them a little bit, and I actually had them at 9 in my rankings, and so that bar,
just that's respect for Vince.
That's respect for me, baby. Look, you're a group of 5 team, right? And you're over a Power 5 team in Cal, so give credit where credit is due, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had them over a different Power 5 team as well. So hey, that's a lot of credit coming from me, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of Cade Madden PTSD. So
you do.
The first step is to admit you have a problem, and that is my problem. So, but look, Marshall's numbers, and again, you have to by who they play.
Well, let's dive into it.
Their numbers are pretty good, Brian.
They went 7-6 last year. Athlon has them projected to go 8-4 this year, 5-3 in the Sun Belt. Now the Sun Belt's a good league. Like for Power 5, for Group of 5, it's a good league. It's App State. It's got Coastal Carolina. It's got Troy. It's got some decent teams in it.
Sure.
They went 7-6 last year. I'm glad that you have them ahead of Navy now. When you remember when we had this conversation before, and you're like, Navy's better. I'm like, they beat Navy 42-7. Sorry, I had to get that in there. Vince. Oh, I'm sorry, I was wrong. 49-7.
Oh my bad.
And at the time I was excited about their quarterback because Grant Wells was a kid I really liked last year at quarterback. Well, he's gone, and he transferred to Virginia Tech, which I was really bummed about. But they got a transfer from Texas Tech, Henry Colombi. He transfers in, but they got a running back. If y'all haven't watched this kid, he's a good football player. Again, for Group of 5, he's Kareem Ali, had over 1,000 yards last year. He's a really good football player. The problem that Marshall's going to have, and why I contemplated putting Cal ahead of them, is a big reason that they were good last year was because of the play of their offensive line. And again, when Kane Madden was there, he was a really good lineman for them. He was an All-American kid for them.
Yeah.
And they had 4 kids. They lost 4 starters from last year's offensive line. And that's what fueled their team. And that's where, Kareem Ali had his success, or Rasheem Ali, had his success as a runner, had over 1,200 yards. The offensive line is what fueled it. And they're going to lose that, which hurts. And then the other thing, too, with them is they only have 4 starters coming back from what was a pretty decent defense last year. I mean, they gave up 23.8 points per game, which in that league is pretty good. If you look at it, they gave up 42 points to East Carolina, 31 to App State, 34 to Middle Tennessee, and then 36 to Louisiana in a bowl game, 53 to Western Kentucky. So they could be had, but then when they would play teams that they had better players, Florida FIU, they gave up 0 points, at 13 to Florida Atlantic, 10 to NC Central, 7 to Navy. So like they would be okay at times, but when they played teams with better athletes, they got exposed and they lost a lot of guys. And so that was one of the things that I really contemplated because of how much talent they lost from their offense. Because as you said about their numbers, Vince, last year, they averaged 33 points a game. Like they could score.
No, absolutely.
They're
30th in scoring offense. I mean, that's saying something.
The reason I contemplated putting them behind Cal is because of the fact that their defense is going to be should be pretty rough this year.
Okay.
I like their head coach a lot, Charles Huff. If Notre Dame fans don't remember the name, he was actually one of the finalists, or one of the guys that Notre Dame really made a run at when they were trying to hire a replacement for Autry Denson. He ended up going to Alabama, was there for like a year. He was at Penn State, went to Alabama, and then got the head coaching job at Marshall. He's done a nice job. They've added some transfers. They're a well-coached team. It's just they're not going to have the overall talent this year that they had last year. And the reason I like this schedule back-to-back is because after Ohio State, I think you're going to play 2 games where you're going to have to grow up as a team in a hurry. And what I mean by that is Notre Dame should beat Marshall and Cal, but this is kind of like where Toledo was last year. They also should have beat Toledo. These are 2 teams that are very similar to Toledo.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so if you so you're going to feel some kind of way after the Ohio State game.
Yeah.
You're either going to feel dejected because you lost, or you're going to feel like $1 million because you won. Either way, you're gonna be on an emotional high or low. And that's when leadership steps up and says, hey, fellas, enjoy this win, because when we get back at it on Monday, that's behind us, and we're focused on what's next. That sounds great, and every coach says it, but doing it is a different animal.
Agreed.
And so I think you're going to play teams that are good enough, and Marshall being a team that Notre Dame's going to be able to say to this team, hey, guys, this is a team that went 7-6 last year. They're projected to go 8-4. I'm looking to see who Marshall plays in their opener this year. They play Norfolk State, so they're going to be undefeated. Right. And the film that the Notre Dame players are going to watch a lot of, they're not just going to watch the Norfolk State game. They're going to watch some of last year's film too and be like, wow, these guys got some dudes, right? Like they can play a little bit. So, you'd like to think that this is a game where you're going to be able to kind of get the guys back to being right, but you're going to play two quality teams. And my concern would be is if you were playing like UNLV and let's say Navy right after Ohio State, I don't know if you would have a realistic view of where you are, because you're just so much better than those two teams. Whereas at least these two teams are both really well coached.
Yeah.
Right. To where Notre Dame's going to win both.
Sure.
Right. I mean, if they beat Toledo last year, that's another team. And Notre
Dame's
Dame's terrible last year.
Playing the way they did. Yeah, exactly.
They're still going to out-talent you to win the game. The question is do you bounce back and start playing your game? Are you going to play a brand of physical football? Or are you going to be disciplined on defense? All those type of things, because these two teams are coached well enough where they're going to be able to punch in the mouth a little bit and maybe make you bleed. And you don't want that, right? You want to come out and just take the fight to them. And so if Notre Dame's not mentally and emotionally ready for these two games, they could be a little more competitive than they should be.
Right.
But if Notre Dame is able to roll them, odds are that this is a team that's got some maturity. So even though they rank 9th and 10th on our schedule, I do think they're both good enough to kind of make me say, you know what, Vince, like we're going to learn a little something about Notre Dame. And I do like the fact that they're back-to-back, and I do like the fact that they're right after Ohio State, because again, both winnable games in case you do need a game to get emotionally over that Ohio State game, right? You can still be able to beat Marshall.
Yeah, right.
But also good enough to where they can force you to kind of say, hey, let's refocus. Let's get back on this thing. You're playing a bowl team in week 2. I mean, that's the thing. You're playing a bowl team in the second game of the year.
True.
That's what you're going to tell it's true. It's what you're going to tell them, but it's true.
Well, and I feel like if things don't go the way, Notre Dame fans want it to go against Ohio State, right? And the odds are they're going to lose to Ohio State. Those are the odds. Those what the odds makers say. So if they lose to Ohio State, you almost have these two games to kind of, and I don't want to call it a get-right game because that's not what I'm referring to, but it's an opportunity to regroup. It's a regroup situation, okay? Because a team can go one of two directions after a big loss, okay? Whether it's a close loss, whether it's not a close loss, whatever, a team can go two different directions. You can be like, well, that's it. We blew it in the first game. It doesn't matter anymore. Or it could galvanize a team, or they could be someplace in the middle. These two games are an opportunity for the coaching staff to pull this team right back to where they need to be, center things up, make sure everybody's where they need to be, and be like, look, this is the team that we can be, okay?
Right.
Week 1 is week 1. We need to get better every week, and this is who we can be. So you've got two games where you can make that happen. And then, of course, you go on the road, I believe, to North Carolina, and then you can start getting things rolling right in the right direction. So I feel like these two games they're not get right games.
Yeah, they're good setup games though. I think.
Exactly. That you can get back on the right track.
You got to get your mind right when you play them.
Yes, absolutely.
But you also don't have to be perfect, because you're still going to be a way better team way more talented team than they are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's move on to team number 8 on our list, Brian, and that comes in week 6. And those are our friends from out in California, the Fighting Trees of Stanford.
It's October 15th.
Yes, right smack dab in the middle of October, when the California teams come to visit Notre Dame and their current schedule breakdown. Stanford falls at number 8. I think it's a little high, but we talked about it and we're like, okay, we'll put them at number 8. Still in the bottom half. They haven't been good lately. I feel like they can only get better, to be honest with you.
Yeah, they can't get. It's hard for them to get worse.
And that's the thing. Like when you look at their rankings from last year, okay, and again, I dove into the stats a little bit. When you look at their ranking, they had the worst offensive and defensive rankings across the board of every team that Notre Dame plays. The worst.
And it really wasn't that. I mean, just for context, they were a 3-9 team last year. And Vince, like, we talked like, 3-9, but like, but man, they played some close games. This is their margins of defeat last year.
Okay.
17, 11, 18, 7. That was at home to Washington, who stunk last year. 45, 21, 30. They lost to Cal by 30. They gave up 41 points to Cal's offense, which averaged 24 points a game last year. And then Notre Dame beat them by 31. So, like, not only were they 3-9, they weren't competitive at 3-9. And their defensive coordinator still has a job.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready for that.
But I mean, in all seriousness, like they gave up 32.4 points per game last year. They gave up 31.7 the year before that. They gave up 29.8 the year before that. And then he still has a job. And this is, you want to know why David Shaw is not winning the way he used to? It's stuff like that.
Yeah.
Lance Anderson has been a really not a good defensive coordinator, and it's gotten worse the last 3 years. And there's just he's still there.
Yeah, they were the only team. I looked up 4 rankings, right? Scoring O, scoring D, total O, and total D. Okay,
right.
Just to kind of get a picture of who these teams were last year. They were the only team in triple digits for every category on Notre Dame's schedule. 113th in scoring offense, 106th in scoring defense, 122 in total offense, and 113 in total defense. That's I mean, that's the struggle bus, man. I mean, that's tough. That is tough, man.
It's epically brutal.
There's nothing to hang your hat on, though. Right. Like that was my issue for last year with Stanford.
Yeah.
They had nothing.
Hey, look, they can't run the ball, but at least they can't protect the quarterback either. You know what I mean? That's the kind of thing you're saying about Stanford, right? Like, here's the thing, Vince. I actually contemplated putting them up higher on the list.
Wow.
And here's why.
Okay.
I go through 2 different phases of evaluating Stanford. The first is I go through their offense. I'm like, you know what? Their offense was pretty bad last year, but, part of that was because they played several games without Tanner McKee, right? But even then, when he played, they still weren't that good. But I look at Tanner McKee and I see some things I like. Now, I think he's going to – I mean, people talk about him being a top 10 NFL draft pick. He completed 65.4% of his passes last year, 15 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, a quarterback rating of 138.72. Right? Like, those aren't exactly like knock your socks off numbers, right? And so I don't quite get the NFL hype for him. He's got a great arm. I mean, really big arm, but he's a statue. And the problem is their offensive line was a struggle last year. Now, here's so all that sounds problematic, right? But here's the thing. They were ravaged with injuries on offense last year. Ravaged. I mean, Elijah Higgins only played 10 games. He missed time. John Humphreys only played 8 games. The Tremaine receiver who played early, who had some success early when Stanford was actually like kind of looking good. I mean, Stanford started the year 3-2, right? He played the first 5 games. Michael Wilson only played the 4 games. They had a lot of guys injured last year on offense, and some guys emerged. Benjamin Urasek emerged. Notre Dame fans should remember him. Notre Dame recruited him actually as a defensive end coming out of high school. He's a good football player. But they could never get all their skill together. Well, you've got 5 starters coming back in the offensive line, and this is the other thing. Ryan and I have talked about this in private conversation because, we'll watch film and we'll talk about guys.
Sure.
But, like, they got some talented kids on the offensive line. Like, Walter Rouse is a kid that I'm like, just from a pure talent standpoint, he's really good. Miles Hinton was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. Their right tackle. Whose brother played in Michigan, and his dad was a first-round draft pick in the NFL. Claim to fame of his dad, Chris Hinton, he was the guy that was traded for John Elway from the Colts, or from the Broncos to the Colts, for the number one in that draft pick. So it's just one of those things where, Benjamin Bragg, there's talent there, Vince, but they just don't play well for some strange reason.
Yeah.
And so I almost convinced myself into saying, you know what, they should be higher because they do have talent. Michael Wilson was a really talented 4-star player coming out of high school. Elijah Higgins, 4-star player. Benjamin Urasek, 4-star player. John Humphreys, 4-star player. EJ Smith, 4-star player, the running back. Emmitt Smith's son is they're going to be starting running back this year. He did some nice things last year.
Sure.
It's just, will they be able to put it all together? But I actually do think their offense is going to be better. So they got 10 guys coming back last year from last year's team that were starters. And now that may sound like, well, you got 10 starters coming back from a team that stunk. Yeah, but a lot of those guys weren't there the whole year. And as I said, when they were healthy early in the year, they were 3-2. They beat Oregon in overtime. Now, part of that was because of the situation with Joe Moorhead and being sick and hospitalized right before the game. But they scored 42 points in a win over USC and 41 points in a win over Vanderbilt on the road. So the incompetence we saw late in the year wasn't the same early when they were healthy.
Sure.
And that's the thing we have to acknowledge,
okay.
Right? And so then that tells me, you know what? Stanford needs to get moved up. Then I go look at their defense, and I'm like, man, they really sucked on defense last year. Let's see who they have coming back. No one? Cool. All right. Like, they got a corner that's really good. Outside of that, their talent on defense is just like, wow. Okay. Nope. I mean, there's so, like, it used to be where, like, their defense was loaded with guys in Notre Dame trying to recruit. And now it's like, nope. Like, they just don't have talent. They're really slow.
Yeah.
That's the problem. They're very slow in the front seven.
That's going to hurt them against Notre Dame.
It's going to hurt them a ton. And so I think their defensive coordinator stinks. I mean, with all due respect, I mean, I'm sure Lance Anderson's a nice guy. He's a terrible defensive coordinator. And I just don't see that getting any better. Right. And because they weren't injured on defense last year. That's the thing. I mean, everybody has their bumps and bruises, but they were pretty healthy last year on defense. They just weren't any good. And I don't see that getting better. So their offense would have to get astronomically better for it to really have an impact on their overall record. Now, they're not going to go 3-9. That's the one thing I'm pretty confident in. They're going to be better than 3-9. But how much better? Enough to challenge Notre Dame? Not unless something dramatic happens. They're going to have to get a lot better to do that. But I do think their offense is going to provide Notre Dame's defense with a much better test. If they're coached right and healthy, this could end up being one of the best offensive lines that Notre Dame is going to face this year. Because there's talent there. I mean, Walter Rouse and Miles Hinton, if they are healthy, are one of the better tackle tandems on the schedule from a talent standpoint. It's an unknown of if they're going to be ready to play or not. That's the bigger question.
Right. And it's going to be, my other thing is, if Notre Dame, this defense that they're going to be going up against, if Notre Dame is scoring every possession, now they're going to get out of what they want to do offensively.
Right.
And that because, you know what I mean?
You have to play catch up.
Yeah. And they're not going to be able to.
It puts a ton of pressure on your offense too. It's like, we got to score, man. If we don't score.
And you have to be perfect. Like the offense in that scenario, the offense has to be perfect. And by the time Notre Dame sees them in week 6, or in game 6, I should say, how much pressure is this offense going to be feeling for Stanford, where they know they have to be perfect, especially going across the country to Notre Dame, into Notre Dame Stadium, that environment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's a lot of pressure on an offense, to me, in my opinion, right?
Yeah.
There's still a bottom half team on this schedule. And, let's say you wanted to move them up. My issue with moving them up is then you got to look at the other teams on the schedule and it's like, okay, who are they going to be above? And I think that's also where I would have trouble moving them up. Like, am I putting them above North Carolina, Boston College? You know what I mean? Like, go through the list of the teams that are in the top half. I can't put them ahead of any of them.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I once you kind of dive into it and you see how bad their defense is, you're like, I can't go any higher.
Right.
But when I'm just looking at the offense, though, and this is my point, is when I'm just looking at the offense, like, okay, this is actually has a chance to be a good offense because they've got some receivers that they're big physical receivers. They can play that jump ball game.
Stanford's
we saw what Benjamin Urasek did last year to Notre Dame when he was the only weapon they had to worry about. He still beat him for a long touchdown.
Yeah. And that, like I said, when Stanford was good offensively, was those big receivers, man. It was like, it felt like they had just tight ends everywhere. And ones on the outside.
They would do. I mean, they even beat Julian Love. I mean, they just throw fade routes, and they'd literally go in the end zone and just like box dudes out, and they just throw it up in the air. I mean, I still remember that touchdown Julian Love gave up, where he's like trying to get back around a guy, and he's like, He's just literally like boxing the guy out. And it's just like, okay, that can't be legal, but
it's like, what can you do?
Yeah.
You get around that giant body.
Yeah, seriously.
I get it.
I was waiting on him to like post up and like put his hand up, like, I got it. Like, throw me the oop. It's just, but yeah. So that's where Stanford is, Vince.
Yeah.
Just again, should be better. Looking at their schedule, they play Colgate in the opener. Then it's kind of like, okay, we're going to find out quick how good Stanford is. And that's the other thing that could hurt Stanford is they're not an incredibly deep team. And this is who they play between Colgate in the opener and Notre Dame. Okay. USC at home, at Washington, at Oregon, home against Oregon State. That's who they play in between Colgate and Notre Dame. So that's not exactly ideal.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be a thing too, is like they're either going to be riding high because they've had a couple big wins, or it's like they're ready to. And that's the thing about Stanford is the last couple times they haven't been good, Vince, they kind of quit.
And they just, exactly.
They kind of quit.
Yeah.
I mean,
yep.
And I hate to say that,
like Notre Dame on the road,
that
has a way of making you be like, you know what? Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say that because I do have a lot of respect for David Shaw and what he did there, but I mean, they just kind of quit.
Yeah.
When things don't go their way, they get bad. I mean, we've seen it a lot in recent years. I mean, 2018, start off 4-0 and then lose 4 of their next 5 games. Ended up winning their last 4, but it's like they played some pretty bad teams.
Right.
19, they start off in 2019. They start off with 3 losses and just never recovered. They lost their last 4 games. Again, this is the thing about Stanford. They're often not competitive.
Yeah.
2019, when they were 4-8, they lost by 25 to USC, 18 to UCF, 18 to UCLA, 27 to Washington State, 4 to Cal, 3 to Colorado, and then 21 to Notre Dame. That's the thing is, like, when they lose in glorious fashion. They go
down in flames.
Like,
baby.
they go down in hard flames. and that's the thing that's been kind of sad to watch, to be honest with you. But I just don't think that they're going to be a really overly competitive team. I mean, they could score 28 points and get destroyed by Notre Dame.
Right. Because they give up 50. I mean,
right. But a lot of this should be a blowout win, but a lot of it's going to come down to the one biggest unknown I think we both have about this football team is just how good is the Notre Dame offense going to be?
Yes, absolutely. And we're talking about this game specifically. How good can Notre Dame's offense be versus how bad the Stanford defense could be? You know what I mean? And what's that? I don't know. It's interesting.
Right.
It's going to be interesting. Right. I agree with you. Last team on the list for today, Brian. I think we nailed it as far as how many we were allowed to talk about today.
Yeah.
But the last team on the list, and this might surprise some people being at number 7, and that's the Syracuse Orange. This is week number 8.
I actually contemplated putting them a little higher.
Okay. So you're high on some of these teams.
But I didn't. So I'm not high. It's just there's a lot of mediocreness in the middle of the schedule.
I said to you when we were talking about this, I was like, some of the teams in the middle, I feel like you could just put in a shaker, shake them up, and then kind of pull them out in whatever order, and I think that's kind of where we're at. But the Syracuse Orange,
we should have played darts. We should have just put 5 through 12 and just start throwing darts and see who would be next.
That'd been fun. Going to the Carrier Dome, I assume, for this one. They're going out to New York.
And I don't care what they renamed it.
It's
on
the Carrier
Irish Dome. Breakdown shows, it will be the Carrier Dome.
Absolutely. Yep. I didn't even know they had another name. I've never been out.
They renamed it this offseason. Got to get that money.
Whatever. It's a giant indoor craziness. I mean,
I've never been. I'm excited to go.
I've never been either, so I might hide in your suitcase. But
there you go. Well, I'm probably driving out there, so if you want to hop in the passenger seat, you can do that.
I would drive to it.
I was kind of thinking about making it like a week-long trip. Stopping and going to Niagara Falls, and I haven't been there since I was a senior in high school. And
you make it a little second honeymoon going to Niagara Falls. There you go.
Yeah. You think I'm taking Ange? Going solo, homie. I'm just kidding.
All right.
Please don't tell Angela I said that.
Or it's on the internet forever. Don't worry. It's no big deal. All right. So talking about Syracuse, they come in as the 7th team on our list. So the last team we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
Talk talk to me about the Syracuse Orange, and because they're not the Orange Men anymore, they're the Orange,
Right.
and what they bring to the table. I know.
Syracuse went 5-7 last year, but they do bring 8 guys back on both sides of the ball. So they return 8 starters, 8 guys on defense. Averaged 24.9 points per game, gave up 26.3 points per game. They were an interesting team, Vince, because they actually started off well. Like they were actually they beat, if you remember correctly, they beat Liberty last year, early in the year. And I thought, Syracuse is rolling. They were 3-1 to start the year. I should have known it was fool's gold because their one loss was to Rutgers. They beat Ohio by 20, lost to Rutgers, beat my former boss at Albany, 62-24. He wasn't my boss at Albany. He was my boss at Duquesne. Then they beat Liberty 24-21. And then the next 3 games, like they lost them all, but they were super close. They lost by 3 points at Florida State. They lost by 3 points to Wake Forest. They lost by 3 points to Clemson, and they had a chance to win each one of those games. Then they beat Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech, and then they beat BC at home. So at that point in time, they're 5-4, and it's like Syracuse is going to make a bowl game. Then they got destroyed by Louisville, 41-3. Yeah. They got destroyed by NC State, 41-17. Got destroyed at home by Pitt, 31-14. So it's like you just got one win and you're bowl eligible. And your losses have been competitive, and then the wheels came off.
Yeah.
And that just has kind of been the deal the last few years with Coach Babers is, you think they're kind of ready to turn the corner, and then and then the year before they were awful.
He's been there for a little bit, and so is the heat turned up on his seat a little bit? I
think it's got to be. I mean, he's still riding high off that 10-win year in 2018.
Okay.
And, and they were a good football team that year. If you remember that year, that was the year that Notre Dame beat them 36-3, but they lost by a touchdown to Pitt, almost beat Clemson. Remember, Chase Bryce came off the bench. They knocked Trevor Lawrence out of the game. It was his first career start. Syracuse had a win.
Syracuse, man.
Yeah, like, they do.
I don't know what it's
so weird.
I don't know what it is.
Syracuse knows how to play Clemson for some insane reason. They beat him in 2017, almost beat him in 2018. They blew them out in 2019. 2020 was a competitive game. Clemson ended up winning 47-21, but they were actually losing. Clemson was losing in the second half to Syracuse.
They were.
And then last year they beat them by 3.
Yeah.
And they beat them in 2017 is the year they beat them. That was the year that Clemson was actually the number 1 seed in the playoff that year, but their only loss was to Syracuse.
Yeah.
In a game where Kelly Bryant got knocked out of the game. And that was a weird game because like he got knocked down several times. Just like he was like a heavyweight fighter that kept getting knocked down, but he kept getting up and then finally just got hit one too many times and they knocked him out of the game.
Nuts.
That was 2017 in the Carrier Dome. So just one of those weird teams. But Notre Dame has blown them out the last 2 times they played, including 2018, 36-3. If you remember correctly, there was Eric Dungy got knocked out. Eric Dungy got knocked out of the game. It was 14-0. I mean, they picked Jalen Elliott. You remember picking him off early in the game. That was a game at Yankee Stadium. Ran it back inside the 10. Notre Dame scored. I mean, they were all over Syracuse. Maybe Syracuse would have scored another touchdown or 2, but I promise you Notre Dame would have kept pouring points on if Syracuse would have kept scoring. They would have kept pouring points on because they could not stop them.
Yeah.
But here's the interesting thing about this Syracuse team. So, again, they bring a lot back. They actually have a pretty decent offense and a really good running game. You remember 2 years ago when they played in 2020, you remember that Sean Tucker kid who took that touchdown. He went 80 yards for a touchdown. Yeah. He had a really nice year for them last year. He rushed for, if you look at the he rushed for 1,496 yards last year, 6.1 yards per carry, 12 touchdowns. And their quarterback is a really good runner. And this is partly why I considered moving them up. Is because what did we talk about yesterday? Notre Dame has a hard time with teams that have mobile quarterbacks. Garrett Schrader last year rushed for 781 yards and 14 touchdowns. He averaged 4.5 yards per carry. And so that's kind of my concern. Now, here's the flip side. He can't throw, or at least he doesn't throw.
Yeah.
He's had some success in the past. He was actually a relatively highly ranked quarterback. If you remember, he actually started as a freshman at Mississippi State.
Okay.
And did some nice things, but in transferring to Syracuse, he completed 52.6% of his passes for barely over 1,400 yards in 12 games, 9 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. His quarterback rating was 113.70. They're just not a threat to run the ball or to throw the ball. And that's why if you look at their schedule last year, that's why when they did lose games, especially late in the year, their offense just couldn't score late in the year because teams just said, okay, We're gonna load the box and make you beat us throwing the football, and they couldn't. But they've got a really good offensive line coming back. They have 3 starters in their offensive line coming back. Both of their tackles come back. Tucker comes back. They have some decent receivers coming back, and their quarterback comes back. So, and Dino Babers had made a name for himself as an offensive mind, if you remember correctly. I mean, he was really good at Eastern Illinois. I believe he was Jimmy Garoppolo's head coach at Eastern Illinois. I could be wrong on that, but I thought he was. Went to Bowling Green. They scored a ton of points at Bowling Green. And when he went to Syracuse, I mean, they scored a lot of points at Syracuse. And in 2018, Syracuse averaged 40.2 points per game. Here's what they've done since: 28.3 in 19, 17.8 in 20, and then 24.9 last year. I mean, they've fallen off a cliff.
Yeah, they have.
So the key for Syracuse is going to be, can they get their pass game going? That's going to be the key. Their defense is like, they try hard, but they don't have the athletes they had a couple. Remember, a couple years they had like Andre Sisco. They had another NFL caliber DB.
They were total defense last year, which is crazy to me. The other numbers didn't really line up with that because they were 64th in scoring defense, 18th in total defense, which is like,
well, part of that's the offense turning the ball over.
Sure.
But they've got some, they don't have the talent they had a couple years ago, but because they don't have quite the depth at secondary. They have a really good corner named Garrett Williams. Their safeties are just okay. But remember a couple years ago when they played, they had 2 really good defensive ends that could rush the quarterback. They don't have that now. That's a big problem for them, is they're not really good up front, and they have to replace all those guys. So, to me, Syracuse could be a sneaky, challenging team, and they play them kind of right in that stretch where you're like, it should be that get right time.
Should be. You
got to go out to Syracuse. It comes after Stanford and UNLV. But I'm telling you, Vince, I really contemplated moving them up ahead of North Carolina because of when they play. I'm just not sure if North Carolina is going to be as good on September 24th as they're going to be on November 7th. And that's my thing. Like, North Carolina is one of those games where it's like, I'd rather not play them later in the year.
Sure.
I'd rather play them now, as they're breaking in a new quarterback, a new offensive lineman, and all those kind of – they're getting used to the new scheme under Gene Chizik and that kind of stuff.
I have more faith in North Carolina than I do in Syracuse, I think, as a whole, like as a roster.
Sure.
I think I have more faith in North Carolina, and they're both away games for Notre Dame. I don't know. I'm more scared, more worried about North Carolina than I am about Syracuse. And I think
that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. But I look at Syracuse and the competitive games they had last year against some pretty good teams. I mean, they had 3-point losses to a pair of 10-plus win teams in Clemson and Wake Forest.
Sure.
They can run the ball and they have a mobile quarterback. But again, for me, it's more so would I rather the week that they play Syracuse, right? What did we say? It was October 15th. Is that when we said this game was going to be played, or was it actually it's later? It's October 29th. October 15th is Stanford.
Yeah,
it's October 29th. It's the week before Clemson. That's another part of it too.
Sure.
It's the week before Clemson.
Right.
But here's the deal. Would I rather play Syracuse or North Carolina on October 29th? And the answer is I'd rather play Syracuse. But the reason I contemplated putting Syracuse ahead is because we said it's about timing.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if North Carolina is going to be as good on September 24th because it's going to be start number 4 for their quarterback, and their reshaped offensive line, and they're going to be just in game 4 of getting used to Gene Chizik's defense and all that kind of stuff. But then the other part of it too is North Carolina is going to be pretty battle tested by then. North Carolina doesn't like cakewalk through their first 4 games. They have to play App State in week 2. Right. So they're going to get a little bit of a test. They have to go on the road and play Georgia State, who's not good, but it's a road game. There's adversity they have to kind of go through getting on the road. So you'll know a little bit more about them. But that's really what it boiled down to for me, Vince, was like you said, I just think Syracuse, what it came down to it was at the end of the day, North Carolina has more playmakers that could rip off big plays. And how do you get upset by a team like this? You and I have talked about this. You got to outscore them. And I'm much more concerned about North Carolina potentially outscoring Notre Dame than I am about Syracuse.
Sure, absolutely.
Because even though I'm worried about the mobile quarterback, I'm just not worried about them throwing the football against Notre Dame.
And that makes them one-dimensional. And anytime a team is one-dimensional, I'll take that team over a potentially multi-dimensional team all day long. All day long.
So that's where it came down to for me.
Mobile quarterback hurts you if you're playing the pass, because there's holes for him to run. If you're playing the run, a mobile quarterback is not as dangerous, you know what I mean? Because you've got more guys up close to the line of scrimmage. Absolutely. I'm with you. So that is going to do it. And look at that. Boom, 1 hour, just like that.
Yeah.
That is going to do it for the first half of our schedule.
Didn't even do it on purpose.
I know, that was amazing.
Let's see if we can do this in an hour. Yeah. And the thing, we were going to do all 12 teams.
I know, right? And we're going to talk more about the top 6 teams than we are about the bottom 6. That's just going to be that facts.
Well,
anyway.
The first couple, maybe not.
Okay,
like
fair
North Carolina and but the BC is going to be interesting. And it's going to be interesting.
Absolutely.
It's going to be interesting. We all know who the number 1 team is going to be, so that'll kind of bleed into the Q&A time.
That's teams.
You're funny.
And we will be back on Wednesday.
Well, we're not done yet. We have a Q&A, man. Okay, just
don't go anywhere. Don't go anywhere. I'm just foreshadowing the second half preview. We're going to do that on Wednesday when Brian and I are back together again in the afternoon. But stick around because we are going to have a little bit of a mailbag as well, as we always do. We've been starring a few questions here and there as they go.
And some comments, too. Get some good comments. Yeah.
Worried about people's colors and things of that nature. But so that's 7 through 12. 1 through 6 are going to be on Wednesday. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Let's jump into our daily mailbag, Brian, right off the bat here. So if you've got questions, please put them into the chat. We will star them. We will get to them. Let's see what the people... What do the people have to say today, Brian?
Well, I think there actually has been a lot of conversation about a whole lot of different things, but there's been really good talk about y'all actually rallied after, I don't know what the heck y'all were talking about early. Y'all rallied pretty well, and there's a lot of good talk about the opponent. So if you have some questions or things you'd like to bring up, please let us know. Throw those in there now. Alan Watson kind of kicks things off because I do have a serious question. What is the first few days of camp like? Nothing like the old two-a-days. Well, they're definitely nothing like that.
No,
that's for sure.
No, there are any days of camp that are like the old two-a-days. That doesn't even exist anymore. And I at high school level or the college level,
which I'm actually okay with.
Yeah, I am too. There's a piece of me that's like, man, they should do it the way we did it. But then
the only justification, I had that first thought too. Yeah. Like, made you mentally tougher. And then you actually sit and think about it, you're like, did it really? Right.
Yeah, right.
Because anything about as a player, like, man, because you're just trying to survive. And I'm like, I understand that makes you mentally tougher, but not at the expense of getting good work in from an execution standpoint.
The one thing I will say, and from a high school standpoint, so going through two-a-days and everything in high school, we were there from like 7 a.m. to like 6 p.m., like all day. We ate lunch together. We were together for 2 straight weeks, all day long. That part I did enjoy. You almost were forced to hang with guys you don't normally hang with and things like that. And so I do appreciate that part of it. But from a coaching standpoint, I can't imagine even being a coach back then, because it's just like you can get a lot accomplished in a shorter period of time. I will say that, and you can have your meetings, you can have your practices. If you can't get done what you need to get done in 90 minutes to 2 hours, then you're not doing it right. That's how I feel. So there have been advancements in that kind of a thing. And so from a coaching standpoint, I get it, man. And I also get it where I wanted to be home as a coach. I don't want to be hanging out there all day long. Like, let's get our work in, do what we do, and let's get out of there, man. Let's enjoy at least the last tail end of our summer. But anyway, for Notre Dame purposes, the first few days of camp are helmets only. It is scheme. It is not so much conditioning anymore, because they've been doing that all summer. So it's drill work. It is recognition. It is 1v1s and stuff like that. But they're only wearing a helmet for the first few days.
Yeah, because it takes a while to get kind of used to having the equipment on.
Absolutely. Then they move into shells, which is helmet and shoulder pads. And they only really...
And that's for 2 days, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or no, 1 day, because it's day 5 is when you can go full pads.
Go full pads. And do they even do 2 practices a day anymore? I didn't think so.
No.
So
what you can do is you can do like walkthrough stuff. So like you can there's extra meeting time. There's some walkthrough things you can do that allow you to kind of get back out there, but it's not to the degree that
So I mean, it
used to be.
They step it up. So it's like you start with just helmets, then you go to helmets and shoulder pads, then you go to full pads, and then they back it down again, and then you start kind of coming off of that, and you're not really going full pads anymore. So and no, Lucas Chapman, they are not going to Culver. I believe is what.
That's one thing that we do.
Yes, that's not the only thing we know, but they are not going to Culver. So So there you go. And the decision to do two-a-days the way they're doing it, that's not a Notre Dame decision. That's an NCAA decision. There's rules about all this stuff now.
Right.
You have to slowly kind of stair step it up. So, but
Yep.
good question. Good question.
Yep. I think the other thing too that I like about I do like about not having 2 days, Vince, is as long as you still get the same number of practices in pretty much.
Right.
But I think there's been a lot of more emphasis on you can do team building without it being the way we used to do team building, which is through the adversity of y'all better survive this second practice.
Yeah.
You know, because
Absolutely.
when we were kids, it was you had 2 days every day for the first
weeks.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Then it was 2-1, 2-1, 2-1, and they just got rid of it all together, which I think is smart.
Right.
And again, it's not because it's like, oh, you're soft. It just you can get that. You can be in great condition and you can get plenty of work in without it being that. Plus, I also like the idea of it allows you more weight room time.
Yeah,
in my opinion, because the one thing you could not do in fall camp when I was coaching and when I was playing, I wasn't going to the weight room the next day. I could barely lift my arm up.
Yeah, we never hit the weight room during
right. But now you can get weight, you can get morning workouts in or evening workouts in and those type of things. So it allows you to continue building and maintaining your strength.
Yeah,
which I think is a very good thing to help you get prepped for the season.
I will also say when I was in high school, not only did we do 2-a-days, but in the middle, we would do a walkthrough of special teams. So it was almost like 2.5 practices. You know, we didn't have that, but we were still running down, doing kickoff, and we were doing special teams. They didn't want to worry about special teams during the actual 2 practice times. So, yeah, it was intense back in the day. There's no question about that.
Yeah. We have some people that want to try to get you a fathead poster of Kane Madden.
We were talking earlier about Kane, about somebody coming out of the tunnel with I
still feel really bad for Kane Madden because I think he took a lot of the brunt of the frustration people had with Jeff Quinn and Brian Kelly. And I don't think that's necessarily fair.
I don't think it is either. I think if he would have come over to Notre Dame.
It's not like he wasn't trying.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
If he would have come over and had Harry Hiestand as his coach, things would have been a little bit different. Now,
he wouldn't have been as bad, but he's just not a Notre Dame level player. That
might have been replaced. But that
he definitely would have been replaced. He wouldn't have started under Harry Hiestand.
That's what I'm saying. We said, and it had nothing to do with him as like individual or anything else, but when they announced that he was coming to Notre Dame, we threw in the tape of Kane Madden at Marshall.
Yeah, because Pro Football Focus, All-American, all this. Yeah,
we broke it down, and I remember I sent the video to Chris Summers, another guy that works with us, and
he's your O-line guy. Used to be your O-line coach.
And I said, hey, because he didn't know. This was before they officially announced it, but you knew about it. You told me. I said, watch this kid. Tell me what you think of him. He's like, he's a good mid-level college player. Like I don't.
He was really good Sun Belt caliber.
Yeah, absolutely. But he never translated to being a Notre Dame level player based on the film that I was watching, and it proved to be a fact at Notre Dame, and that's unfortunate. They put him in a position to fail, in my opinion, and that's not fair.
And the frustration that people had was taken out on him.
Yes, I agree.
And that's what
I
felt bad about, to be completely honest with you. We got this down here, Vince, from Irishman 7114, coming to y'all from the ER, having to get stitches from accidentally cutting my leg open. I'll be fine, but we still appreciate prayers that it heals soon.
Man.
We will definitely pray for you, but I do, and our prayers don't come with any conditions. Obviously, and we will certainly pray for you. But I do feel like when you say something like you accidentally cut your leg open, you got to share that story. Like, how did you accidentally cut your leg open? So I'm very curious about that, my friend. But in all seriousness, heal up. Obviously, we appreciate you, and we got a dude on a date with his wife watching the show. We got one of our guys in the ER watching the show. I love this community.
Weights, if you're not like dying, take
love this community.
I
really do. I really do. Here's a good question from Irish Chi-Town. Brian, what would help Stanford?
The list is long.
Well, I mean, if I'm being serious, number one, David Shaw needs to be rejuvenated a little bit. I think he's gotten very complacent.
Comfortable.
And I think part of it is because there is no pressure from Stanford to take the next step. I just don't think they really care about whether or not their football team is good, because it's just like, we'll get our Pac-12 money, but Stanford's a lot like Notre Dame. They don't need the TV money. Like they're doing fine, and they're so good at everything else but football. I mean, like Stanford has, if you take football out, Stanford probably has the nation's best sports program. I mean, they're in that conversation every year, Vince, because they're so good at all the Olympic sports. Their women's basketball team, didn't their women's basketball team win the title a couple years ago? Tara Vanderveer, right? She's been there forever.
Yeah.
And she won another title a couple years ago, I believe. You know, they're always great in swimming and golf and all these different sports. I mean, Tiger Woods is an alum and all that other kind of stuff. But, you know, it just their football team, I just don't think they care. You know, look, all the facilities in the world would help, but look, they're so behind the times in how they run their program. Like, I still don't think they allow early enrollees. They just now started letting kids visit early.
Right.
Because like they wouldn't, right.
You had to be accepted into the school.
Right.
I think to officially get a scholarship and all these different.
I mean, they're so behind the game and what they do. And then you need grinders.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to a buddy of mine and he was like, they were like one of the last schools to figure out how to use Zoom and recruiting. Like Stanford was one of like
smartest people.
You should have had someone from your school should have invented this new program.
Right.
You know, that you know, it's just it reminds me a lot of Notre Dame sort of in the Ty and Davy era. The talent's not the same anymore. You don't have an administration that necessarily cares, right? You don't necessarily have an institution that is willing to pay the money to build the things up. And more so, you don't have coaches in place that have a sense of urgency to do the things that they need to do. And unfortunately, I think, you know, like Stanford used to be, we've talked about this before, won't rehash it, but they were such a good physical running team, and now they're soft. How does that happen?
Yeah, right.
That's complacency.
Yes.
It's you've lost your edge. And so, honestly, Irish Hightown, until David Shaw gets his edge back or they make a coaching change, and I would never advocate for Stanford firing David Shaw. I feel like, yeah, he's kind of earned.
And I think he's an alum. Like he's a good fit there. It's just I feel like he's complacent. Like
somebody needs to step in and say, "Hey, coach." Right? Like we gotta do. And he's always like talking to the media and he's doing the NFL draft stuff. And I just think he's comfortable.
Yeah.
And when you're comfortable, a lot of times you lose your edge.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true, man. I see it all the time at the level I'm around all the time.
Yeah.
See it all the time. Coaches get comfortable and they just kind of expect it to be how it always was.
And when you're comfortable, you're going to surround yourself with people that aren't going to rock that boat. And Lance Anderson's not very good, but you know, he does what I want him to do. And he, you know, and I just, you know, and the other thing too is he's made some bad hires. Look, Stanford is about 3 or 4 really good hires away from getting back on track. Because the thing about Stanford, they can still recruit.
Sure.
Right. I mean, they just went and got Cedric Irvin Jr., which I'm very happy about. I mean, I look at their, you know, Walter Rouse was a highly ranked guy. Miles Hinton was a 5-star guy. Tanner McKee was a highly ranked recruit. Michael Wilson was a 4-star. Elijah Higgins was a 4-star. Ben Urasek was a 4-star. I mean, they got a lot of highly ranked guys, and they've been able to do that. They haven't made their standards tougher. They have to, as an institution, adjust and say, hey, as long as they're bringing in the same quality of student, we can change we can change our processes to match the modern realities of recruiting, you know, early enrollees and stuff like that. As long as kids still, you know, meet your standards, you can do that. But it's really about, you got to get back to getting those guys on the staff that can grind and that'll put into work and that have the ability. I mean, they started losing their edge when they lost Derek Mason, and they lost. I'm trying to remember his name. Vince, was it Bloomgren? Mike Bloomgren was their O-line coach who left to become the head coach at Rice.
Gotcha.
They've never been the same team since they left. They've been soft up front of the offensive line. They've been soft on defense. They had some athletes. I mean, this is a place that's produced some legitimate NFL DBs. They used to be beating Notre Dame for DBs every year.
Yeah, they did.
And guys that were drafted high and beat them for Tom Carter's kid. They beat him for Justin Reed. They beat him for a lot of different kids that Notre Dame wanted and in the secondary, and that just stopped. Paulson Adebo. Right,
they've had some dudes at running back, you know what I mean?
And they've lost all that
long line of good running backs.
They've become soft, and I just think that only changes if David Shaw kind of says, you know what, I miss winning. And I think this year could be a bit of a, you know, like, look, they weren't good in 2019. They had a ton of injuries. And the crazy thing is he's had better quarterbacks in recent years than he did when they were really, really good. Like if some of those, I love Kevin Hogan, right? But he was limited as a player. If they had Tanner McKee and Davis Mills on those teams, you know what I mean? Like, look what they were when they had Andrew Luck.
Right.
I mean, Davis Mills was a third-round pick, despite the fact he hardly played at all in college. That's how talented he is. Tanner McKee's a guy that people think's a first-round pick. Quarterback, they're still good. It's everything else around him, the edge, the toughness. When was the last time you watched Stanford play Notre Dame or anybody in Vince, and you're like, man, that looked like a vintage physical stand? No, Notre Dame just pushed him around last year.
Absolutely.
They pushed him around in 2019.
Right.
And that used to be the other way around. Stanford was pushing Notre Dame around.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And honestly, until they get back to that,
they had to get over that Stanford hump.
Yeah.
Remember, I mean, that was a legit problem for Brian Kelly. He couldn't get over the Stanford hump. And then when he finally did, that also kind of coincided with the Stanford fall from greatness. You know what I mean? But that was a huge hurdle. I remember talking about that with you, like why they have this problem with Stanford. They just cannot beat Stanford because they could never match the physicality.
Kelly started 2-6 against Stanford.
Right.
2-6. He finished his career with a losing record against Stanford.
Correct.
I mean, and again, but look at the teams they beat. They beat a 9-5 team who finished unranked, and then the last two teams they beat were 4-8, 3-9.
Garbage. Yeah, but still,
right.
I mean, that was a
to your point is they've lost that. They're not that team anymore. But to your point, we talked about this in 2012, Vince. That was the game. If you beat Stanford, if you can beat that Stanford team, you could beat anybody, and that was the mentality that Notre Dame had.
Yeah.
And now it's just like, oh.
Just another blip on the radar.
We can get our backups ready for this game. And I don't want to see that like that.
Right.
But yeah, it's going to have to be about. It's going to be so. Shaw's going to have to get back on track, and they're going to have to. This institution have to adapt to the changing world of college football, not by changing their standards, but changing their willingness on timing and being able to do other type of things like that. Michael Johnson, this is an interesting question, Vince. Michael Johnson, Vince and Brian, out of all the bottom teams, how many players could play at Notre Dame? So let's just say guys who could be starters at Notre Dame.
Okay. Because that's important. Okay. I think starters is the level here.
There's nobody at UNLV, in my opinion. There's nobody at Navy. There's nobody coming back at Cal that I view that way. I feel the same way about Marshall. Stanford has some guys that I would take at Notre Dame. Their corner, and I still can't get this kid's name right. Let me just give me a second. It's he's got kind of two last names. Just give me a second. I apologize. But he's a guy that some people think is a potential first-round pick. He's an all Pac-12 guy. And that's going to be something I'm going to talk about with Syracuse as well. Where is he? All right, let's go past defense. Just give me a second here. Apologies. Here we go. Caillou Blue Kelly. He's a really good player. And Garrett Williams for Syracuse at corner is a really good player. Those are two guys that I think could definitely start opposite Cam Hart. No question about it, in my opinion. That's no slap in the face to Clarence Lewis. It's just those guys are really good football players. So they both could play there. Sean Tucker would be a pretty darn good running back at Notre Dame. I mean, he rushed for 1,400 yards last year running behind the Syracuse offensive line, Vince. He could do some things at Notre Dame. Stanford, honestly, here's the funny thing is Stanford probably has the most players that could play at Notre Dame.
You rattled off a bunch of offensive linemen that were 4- or 5-star guys, right? I mean, it has some dudes there for sure.
They're just not coach. You give Harry Hiestand some of those kids, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd be happy about that. I mean, Tanner McKee's a guy that people project as a first-round pick of quarterback.
Right.
So, he could play at Notre Dame. Let's just say Tyler Buckner had an injury and Tanner McKee entered the portal. I would be begging Notre Dame to go after Tanner McKee. I'm not going to say that now because I want to see what Tyler Buckner can do. But if he wasn't there, I would be because, again, he's not a very mobile guy, but you'd be playing behind a really good offensive line. And he's got a really big arm. To me, if Notre Dame had Michael Wilson, if he's healthy, as their boundary receiver, I'd be feeling really good about their receiving core going into the season. They got a couple guys like that. Tremaine's a kid that I think could play the boundary for Notre Dame. So they've got some kids that they just don't have as many as they used to in the trenches, especially on defense. And I think that's the bigger thing for me, Vince, that I would say those kind of guys. And I'll tell you what, right now, I mean, if he was in the portal and Notre Dame has some depth issues right now, the Rasheem Ali kid at Marshall's a good football player. Like I wouldn't bring him in to start, but if with Notre Dame's injury issues, let's just say that Logan Diggs wasn't coming back at any point in time this year, and they need another running back, and that kills in the portal, I'd talk to him.
Yeah,
I'd definitely talk to him. And Sean Tucker can definitely play there. Any others, Vincent, you can think of, or did I nail them all?
You nailed them.
Got him. Okay. The Stanford one though, the O-line that you brought up, that's the one position you're like, yeah, there's some dudes that can battle.
Which is what surprises me about how bad they are. You know what I mean?
Right.
Or how
Exactly.
I shouldn't say are.
Well, they are because they haven't proven that they're any better. I mean, they literally ran for less than 100 yards per game last year.
Right.
It's embarrassing. It really is.
Rob Osgood says, I love the schedule. The bigger games are spread out a little. I think this helps Notre Dame in a huge way. I do feel that the first 4 games will tell a lot about the team. Thanks, guys. I agree. I think there's a little bit of everything in the first 4 games. So I think you're going to find out a lot about this team for sure. You'll continue learning about them as the season wears on because we've talked about this before. I like how the schedule kind of lines up. When we were talking about the quarters and things like that, like I like how this schedule lines up and how things are spread out and the order and the homes and the aways and all of that. Yeah, if you want to break it down, I think the first 4 games are going to be very telling about Notre Dame. Absolutely.
Yeah. If I could do anything different, I'd want November to be not quite as daunting. I'd rather have that kind of in October than maybe. But
anyway, but yeah.
But here's the nice thing about it, Vince. If USC is what people think they are, and Clemson is what we think there are, and BC's improved, which you and I both think that they will be because they weren't in this conversation, you're going to have a lot of statement games to make in November, which has been one of the issues Notre Dame has had in recent years. Their November games have been kind of, because teams have been down.
They're going to make a statement.
And the one year that they did have a big November victory was when they beat Clemson, which that win helped spark them to get to the playoff, even though they lost to Clemson in the ACC title game. So that is going to be the good thing. You're going to have Clemson, you're going to have BC and USC in November. So the whole, Notre Dame doesn't play anybody. And if those teams are what we think they're going to be or what other people think they're going to be, a combination of the two, Notre Dame's going to end the season with some really quality wins that are going to be statement wins. So that is the counter. I'm just more looking at it as like that's when you're usually pretty worn down. And it's my BK PTSD of the 2017 season and how that ended because you had a tough November. So I'm going to be honest. I have a little bit of that in me as well.
It's real.
Yep.
Okay. I've been thinking about this question for a while. From Archer452, our resident Ohio State fan. Thanks for hanging out with us. Question.
And yes, we will always call you that, Archer. It's out of love.
That's who you are, brother. What are the 5 college football stadiums you haven't been to that you would love to visit? Now, my list, I'm guessing, is going to be way different than Brian's because he's been a way more well-traveled than I am. So
there's schools on my list that I would have had I not had a chance to be there yet.
Yes, absolutely correct. Okay. I have like 9 things written down, so I'll let you. Okay,
you can give them.
So, and they're not necessarily in any order, but they were as I was thinking of them as we were going. So, I would love to go to the cocktail party at Ole Miss. I think that would be a lot of fun. Seeing what that really any SEC team, but like Ole Miss, like that kind of a thing, I think is really intriguing for the atmosphere and all of that. So that would be one. I had Georgia written down. I know you've been to Georgia, Brian. A whiteout at Penn State. Even though I can't stand Penn State, I still think that would be a cool thing to see in person. Just that massive stadium, everything. Like I think that'd be pretty cool to see a night game. That would be cool. Gonna get a chance to see Ohio State, I think. So I have them on my list. So that will be one I can check off this year. So I'm excited about that. I've got Texas, Oklahoma at the old Cotton Bowl.
And I've been to, okay.
I would like the old Cotton Bowl. I think that one would be cool. I know they play at Jerry's World now, I believe. But I think that one would be really cool.
Well, Texas and Oklahoma don't play there still. They don't play in Jerry World. Yeah, the Cotton Bowl's played there, but I still believe that Texas and Oklahoma still play.
Old Cotton Bowl?
Because it's an outdoor game.
Okay, then there you go.
Yeah, let me just look that up. I don't know if it's the old Cotton Bowl, but they play outside the Red River Shootout. Oh, I guess they don't call it that anymore. Let's see where it is played still. It's still played at the Cotton Bowl. Yeah. The Cotton Bowl inside Fair Park in Dallas. Yeah, so it's still played in the Cotton Bowl. So that's more of a game you'd like to go see.
Yes.
I would love that. I would love to go cover that game, or not cover that game, but be at that game someday.
Man, like that would be awesome. I don't know what side I would sit on because it's like literally split down the middle. You know what I
Just
mean?
try to get it like midfield, and then
Right.
you can wear you can like pull Brady Quinn's sister, right? Like have the Oklahoma on one side and the Texas on the other side.
Awesome.
That'd be pretty cool.
That's awesome. I do have Clemson written down. I think I would like to see them running down the hill and all that. Like
that's pretty cool.
It's a cool thing. I would like to see that in person.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
On video today for whatever reason.
Even in pouring rain, it was pretty cool, Vince.
Yeah, that would be cool to see. I would like to see that. I know this might not be popular for other people, and it's not really a stadium. It's more of a game, but I would like to go to the Army-Navy game someday. I think that would be cool to see. Just one time.
Yeah.
See it and say that I've been there. And then my last two, I've got Oregon on there for a couple reasons. One, I just want to see what Nike does at Oregon. Like I just want to see the facilities. I've never been to the Northwest before ever. So I think that would be cool as part of it. You know what I mean? And go to Oregon, I think that would be cool. My last one is the Rose Bowl, UCLA. I would like to go to the Rose Bowl. I've never been to the Rose Bowl. If I have to pick a team in LA to go see, it's certainly not going to be USC. And I've heard the Coliseum is a dump. I don't want to go there.
It is, but I promise you'll want to go there for a game.
Fair enough.
And here's why: because the Coliseum is a flipping dump, and you may make the mistake I did. I was joking with Sean about this the other day, Sean Davis, and I was like, I'm driving to the game because his daughter goes to USC. And so I'm driving to the game, and I made a left where I thought I should have. I made a left where I should have gone straight. I'm driving. I'm like, oh, that's Crenshaw Boulevard. I recognize this area. This was some Boys in the Hood. I'm turning around. I'm not going the right direction. It is a dump, but when you're standing on the field after the game and you're thinking about the fact, you look up and you're like, dude, this is where the Olympics were held. Yeah. This is where Super Bowl #1 was played. Yeah, it's more of the nostalgia than the stadium. And I think that would be the thing that you'd get caught up in if you were at that, Vince, I think.
Yeah.
But the stadium is a dump. The area around it is a dump.
I've heard like there's rats running around and just like
I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
Tires told me that story.
It wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, right.
It wouldn't shock me. I just have never seen it. Yeah.
To sit on top of the press box, at one point, like, I don't know. It just sounds very high schoolish in that regard. So, but anyway, so that's my list. That's my list.
That's a good list.
I did have the big house on there, but I went in there, and that was everything that I hoped it would be, and it was awesome. So, I mean, there's a few that I've been to, but not enough.
Yeah. So I've been lucky. I've been to Clemson for a game. I've been to Georgia for a game. I went to Ohio State as a kid. That was the first college football game I ever went to was at Ohio State. And it was 1989. It was the year before Barry Alvarez got hired at Wisconsin. They blew out Wisconsin late in the year. Scotty Graham went off. Greg Fry was their quarterback. Remember him, Vince? So that's how far back that goes. I've been to Texas. Darrell K. Royal would have been one on my list. I've been to Michigan. I've been to USC. Trying to think of some other cool places that I've been lucky enough to. I've been to Jerry World for that, obviously. I've been to Virginia Tech. That's one a lot of people have on their list. I've been to North Carolina. A lot of those places. Been to NC State. The places I would still like to go see. I'm actually very excited that Notre Dame has a home and home with Florida, and I'm still hoping that by then the swamp is still a thing because I've been in the swamp, but I've never been to a game at the swamp.
Yeah, I would like to go to that as well.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I'd love to see a game in Alabama. Again, it's not so much that I think the stadium is cool, but I'd like to be in Tuscaloosa, see what it's like, T-Town and all that. But it's also the nostalgia, the games that have been played there. I'm still mad at myself for not seeing a game at Oklahoma. The fact that I got out of this business to go coach for 2 years and missed that game. I'm still pissed at myself for that, Vince, to be honest with you. I'd love to see a game at Boise. I think that'd be really cool. I heard Boise's a cool little town. I'd love to see the blue field and all that. I would really like to see a game in Neyland Stadium, Tennessee. Okay. I think that'd be a really cool place. I've been to Penn State, and the stadium just was kind of like – I went there for a basketball game a number of years ago, and the football stadium just kind of looked like just big. I think the whiteout maybe would be cool, but just whatever. Hey, we're all wearing white T-shirts. Woohoo! Real creative, right? But the Rose Bowl is the last one. And I don't care. I would rather I want to see a game there. I'd prefer that it actually be a Rose Bowl.
Fair enough.
But if it's just a UCLA home game, that'd be cool too. I think that'd be a pretty cool thing.
I would
Again,
actually not mind seeing the UCLA USC game where they both wear home jerseys. I still think that's pretty stinking cool.
yes, I was talking about that in a show the other day. We're talking about the Oregon show I was on the other night. It's like that's the traditions that I love about college football that sadly we're losing.
I dig that a lot. Yeah.
That stuff just doesn't matter as much.
So
yeah. Here's one I didn't think about, but now it's on my list. This is another one that if I would have gone through all the schools, I would have added to my list. There's going to be some that I'm gonna kind of think about, like, oh man, I should have talked about that one, right? Like the Boise one I added late because as I'm kind of going through the conferences in my head,
right?
Yeah, like I mean, I think the Egg Bowl would be kind of fun, but I don't really care about going to that stadium, which is kind of the question. So I mean, I don't care as much about that.
Yeah. I think I picked some more like the atmospheres and not necessarily the stadium itself.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely part of it for sure.
Yeah,
like Army Navy, they hold that in an NFL stadium. Like I just want to be there for the Army Navy game.
Right.
You know I mean?
Right.
So
those are cool games. Like if the question was, what are 5 games you want to see? Like that, like the Cotton Bowl, Oklahoma to Texas be on there. I'd want to go to Ohio State Michigan game. I just would. And here's how bad Michigan is. I'd rather see it in Columbus because I don't want to go back to Ann Arbor forever for anything.
So
a lot of those were, Alabama. I'd love to go to an Iron Bowl.
Yeah,
I'd love to go to an Iron Bowl. So those are all, and I'd still, I don't give two rips about basketball, and I still would love to go to North Carolina Duke game. I would love to be at a North Carolina Duke basketball game. That's the only basketball rivalry I've ever wanted to ever have any interest in seeing.
I would want to go to it at Duke. I want to see Cameron.
Probably. You see those nut jobs in action.
Look, I would rather be at Cameron Indoor than North Carolina's arena, just because of the history and whatnot. And it's just it doesn't look like a basketball arena with all that wood paneling.
It looks like a gym. It looks like a gym. Yeah.
I dig that, man. As much as I dislike Duke, I would love to see that. I would in person.
We got a few more we're going to get to here, Vince. I think somebody was joking with me on the board there. Like you say, we got a couple more, and then like 45 minutes later, you're still answering questions. Y'all keep bringing them in. Tyler Bengi, here we got one from him.
This is Brian and Vince. Any thoughts on the health of universities and finances with more booster money going to the students with NIL? Some schools might struggle more with lesser endowments.
Well, endowments don't have anything to do with football.
Correct.
Like Notre Dame is not tapping into their $20 billion endowment.
I think there's sports people are going to be donating to NIL as opposed to donating to endowment. I think that's what
maybe, but honestly, the numbers for NIL are going to be small compared to athletic budgets. I mean, like Ryan Day is complaining about needing $13 million. If you look at like what teams are spending on their budgets, it's like, okay, it's not that much. But I do think it's going to hurt some teams. I really do, because not every program has that kind. Florida State doesn't have the kind of booster program that can do both really effectively. And so I do think it'll hurt. But look, here's the bigger problem. There are, and COVID exposed this exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many sports programs that do not have any semblance of understand how to live within their means.
Right. Absolutely. And COVID exposed.
Right. And that's why TV money is what they're all chasing, because that's how they get more to then be able to spend all their things. And that's why Notre Dame isn't in the same situation as other schools are. And people can complain about, oh, Notre Dame is one of the very few institutions that operates in the black in regard to where they are. And they're doing that with a way smaller TV deal than those other teams. And there's a lot of reasons for that I don't really care to get into. But that's a big reason why Notre Dame isn't chasing the max deal for TV. They want a bigger deal. But here's something people have to remember too, because this constant talk about they're going to be forced to the Big Ten. Within the next 3 years, Notre Dame is going to have a new apparel deal and a new TV deal. That's going to be much bigger than what they've had. So any budgetary concerns Notre Dame may have are going to be gone in 3 years. And again, Notre Dame is in good position where they are. But the thing is like, it's like, just think about this. This is what people have to remember. Notre Dame signed with Under Armour for $90 million. 2 years, this was in 2014. That deal expires in 2024. 2 years later, Michigan signed a deal with Nike for $160 million. That was in 2016. What is Notre Dame's apparel deal going to be in 2 years? And I can assure you that Notre Dame has been in conversations with all the apparel companies, know very well when Notre Dame's Under Armour deal's out.
Going to blindly re-up with Under Armour.
deal's up. What are we going to do now? They're already in those NBC runs out in 2025. Trust me, Notre Dame has already had some level of, hey, we're open to listen. CBS is talking about wanting to get back into college football. They don't have the SEC anymore. Fox Sports would love to have Notre Dame, even if it's not as part of the Big Ten. I'm just telling y'all, right? So that's why I keep saying, like, Notre Dame's going to be fine. People need to calm down and not panic. And if Notre Dame chooses to join a conference because they just wanted to join a conference, it's not because they need the money. That's the reality of it. Here we go. Here's another one, Vince.
We are not Marshall, Brian, and Vince. How many times does Ohio State put it on the ground due to the crazy pressure Notre Dame puts on their O-line and backfield? That's quite the speculation at this point that they're going to like fumble it multiple times. I mean,
I don't care if they put it on the ground ever.
Yeah, right.
What I care about is just put the quarterback on the ground.
Right, exactly.
He can still have the ball in his hand. I don't care. Just put him on the ground.
Great if they put the ball on the ground a couple of times.
Right.
If they do that and Notre Dame's able to recover, it's a different ball game. I mean, let's be honest. I can't predict that Ohio State is just going to fumble the ball multiple times.
Right.
I would love for that to happen, but I cannot predict that to happen. I feel like Notre Dame is going to put a lot of pressure on the offensive line in the backfield.
Yeah.
And that's the way, if there's a script that you're writing to win the game, that needs to happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
A fumble would be great, but I can't predict that they're going to fumble it.
I don't think you kind of go into the game planning for that. I mean, you practice turnovers, right? I mean, you work on those kind of things, but it's not so much that. I'll say this. Those are things that are going to help Notre Dame win, is if they can force some of those. Because again, if you can get the ball, I don't care if it's sacks or forcing punts or whatever, it's get the ball. But turnovers are usually the best because they tend to be either drive killers, meaning you turned it over in your opponent's territory, or they're drive starters, meaning like you get the ball at the 35 going in.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think those are always positives that you want to see from your football team. And that's something that Notre Dame obviously is going to have to be able to do.
Look,
they can't let CJ Stroud get comfortable in the pocket.
You want to win the turnover battle, right? And forcing a couple of fumbles is going to aid you greatly in winning that battle, right? Notre Dame has to protect the football, and they got to try to take it away. That would be fantastic if they could do that.
Yeah. Let's go to the next one, Vince. I love this. Isn't a question, but I just love the excitement that Bernie has here.
Bernie says, don't forget about our two playoff opponents, Alabama and Georgia. Go Irish 14-0. Is he talking about going to see their stadiums?
He's basically saying that Notre Dame, he's saying as we're ranking opponents, he's saying don't forget their playoff opponents. They're going to play Bama and Georgia, beat them both.
They would be on the next show.
We'll do that show in December when the playoff get announced.
It would be a top app show.
Yeah. Here's a question. Archer 452, is USC Notre Dame's biggest rival? Yes. If so, what is the atmosphere at that game? Depends if they're good or not. Like, here's the thing. If Ohio State and Michigan are both 4-7, that game is still going to, from an intensity standpoint, still going to feel like it's, a big rivalry. If USC is not good, people in California don't care about that game.
They don't come. So
you'll have a lot more Notre Dame people there than USC people.
Story for you. So back in the mid 2000s, when USC was really, really good, people came to that game. Like, they were coming to Notre Dame to watch that game, and they would have a gigantic pep rally on Navy Pier in Chicago for USC fans. And I went with my cousin because she's a USC grad, and we have a friendly rivalry going on between us. And I went to the pep rally for USC. Of course, I was decked out in all my Notre Dame gear and everyone was a 20-year-old. But that entire pep rally then got in their cars and came to the game. And there was a huge USC following at the game. When USC is not good, they don't travel. They're not traveling across the country. They're not making – Notre Dame is not a destination for USC fans when USC stinks. They're just not.
Yeah.
So – when there's a ton of USC fans, it's a great atmosphere. When they don't show up, it's not a great atmosphere because it's mostly Notre Dame fans. Everybody's on the same side, and So absolutely, I'm with you 100% on that one. Baby Huey has one here. Brian, during your interview with the Oregon podcast, you talked about how bad the Pac officials are. How would you rank conference officials? Obviously, we're going to stick with the Power Five, I would imagine.
Let's go with them in their own league, because I would say if I'm talking about Notre Dame games, I'm going to have a very negative opinion towards the Big Ten, because I think they purposely rig games. I mean, I think they not rig games. I think they purposely screw Notre Dame. Right. I don't know if it's trying to rig a game. It's just, whatever. But if you're just talking about in game, I'd probably put the Big 12 and the SEC at the top. Be honest with you, Big 10 I'd probably have third, and then ACC is a distant fourth. Like those three are all kind of, they're all decent. They're all decent, all good crews, I think, for the most part, especially when it's a league game. But I think that the ACC's officiating is not good. There's a couple good crews, but overall it's just not good.
Yeah.
And part is because they don't pay. I mean, from things I've heard about, like what they pay. I mean, why would a good official want to be in the ACC, right? And then Pac-12 is like distant fifth. So like there's distance between the top three in ACC, and then there's distance between the ACC and the Pac-12. I mean, they're just incompetent. I mean, it's just the I mean, they'll do things like, I mean, how many times in the last 5 years has the Pac-12 had to come out and apologize after a game for, we got this really wrong? Meaning, like, not that you missed a call, but we interpreted the rules incorrectly. You know what I mean? Like, you don't even know the rules that you're trying to enforce.
Right.
It's just stuff like that where it's like, wow, how do you miss that?
Yeah.
How do you miss that? So I don't see that one.
JWick 13, do you think Notre Dame gets their own channel like the Longhorn Network if they leave NBC? I'm assuming all the content on Peacock would have to go with Notre Dame. Well, it wouldn't go with them because when they created that content, it was the property of NBC. So that it's not going to go away. Like it's probably, I don't know why they would still have it on there, but it's not going to go with Notre Dame, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, Notre Dame will have copyright issues over their actual broadcast, like the actual games, but any of the extra content, Notre Dame doesn't, I don't believe, has access to that. As far as having their own network, if they get picked up by ESPN, will they have a Notre Dame channel? Maybe. I just don't know that I see that. There might be an extra content situation like they use Peacock for if they go to CBS.
Notre Dame will absolutely have their own channel, but it won't be like the Longhorn Network. It'll be more like where they put like videos and highlights, and you've got to like pay a subscription service for that stuff. They may then put like, some of their smaller sports on there, if that aren't part of deals, but it'll be more of like it'd be more of something like that we would do. They'll put interviews on it. Right. They'll put, the highlights from the game that they normally put on Twitter. They may put on there. If you want to watch them, you have to go there. I mean,
Notre Dame is not making a TV deal with a non-air channel so that you have to pay to have access to their games. They're not going to do that. They're going to go with a Fox, a CBS.
Well, not this next time. Maybe 10 years down the road, depending on where streaming is going and all that stuff, maybe. But you're correct, Vince. Their next deal will be with someone big, but it will be with someone big who is going to offer some sort of streaming option. Correct.
And I get that. And I would totally be on board with that. But their actual games, I feel, are going to be on network TV.
If Notre Dame really wanted to make some money, in my opinion, and I don't know if I just think this would work. Maybe it wouldn't, and I'm sure they've done the numbers, but I would have sort of like a subscription service, and like where your production team and all that kind of stuff. I mean, you're sitting like you're having sit downs with coaches. You're like having film sessions. You're having like
scenes and
put all my highlight recaps on there. Just charge a few bucks a month. You can, and you can watch the live. Like I take the live. I would take the live. If you did that, I would then take I wouldn't do it now, but if you did that, I'd take the video feeds off of YouTube Live and Twitter Live, and just say, hey, look, if you want to watch these, you got to put them on the subscription service, because we can't play the whole video, right? We can only play 3 minutes of it, right? And so I think there's a lot of things they could do, and then they could charge at least a low enough amount to where normal folks could afford it.
Sure.
Right. And I think that'd make them some good money. And then there'd be some cool things they could do with that. But It wouldn't be something like where they would do that for, like you said, for games, or
need to be accessible for free.
Right. Because the thing too is that would cost them. They would have to be the ones to pony up to invest in that, as opposed to getting the deal somebody else is paying to now part of your deal with CBS hypothetically is, hey, we're going to pay you $40 million a year, and part of our deal is we're going to invest in what we have to do R&D wise to get this Notre Dame streaming channel as part of the deal that they would then be the ones to create what we just talked about, where Notre Dame then could reap the percentage of the cut of the subscriptions, but it would be the other group doing all the R&D to get it going. That would be the ideal thing to do.
Yep.
In that regard. So good thoughts, Vince. Very good thoughts. All right, let's go here. I think we're getting near the end now.
Okay, so from Brandon Flensner, he says, Brian, do you guys believe this year's Marshall team is better than last year's Toledo team that Notre Dame faced?
It's a little too early to tell. I think Marshall last year was better than Toledo last year, in my opinion. I just don't know if this Marshall team will be as good because, again, they lost a lot of their linemen. And Toledo had some athletes last year. They had decent guys coming back. I think both of them are coached well. I think Jason Candle's a good football coach. I think he hired good coordinators. I mean, we talked about him getting Vince Karras from Mount Union, who was the head coach of Mount Union, won multiple national titles. Following his dad's footsteps, he hired him as D coordinator. He's done a really nice job with them since he's come over. So I would say Marshall's probably a little bit bigger. They're a little bit stronger, just size wise. I think both had pretty decent athletes. I just don't know what Marshall's going to have coming back. That's the thing. I don't know enough about the guys stepping into the lineups to say, but based on last year, they were. Yes, they were. They were. I just don't know if that's going to be the case this year.
Even without Kane Madden.
Be nice. Be nice. He left 2 years ago.
Egging me on in the chat. I couldn't help it.
Yeah. Yep. So you're just so mean.
Or it just punched me right.
So mean.
That's what's going to happen.
Yep. Here we go. Tom Flavin says, a Notre Dame fan since 1953. I will never go to the Coliseum again. 1964, 74, and 2014. Worst Notre Dame losses I've ever seen. Yes, Tom, we are going to definitely blame you for that. And say that you're not welcome back to the Coliseum. Right. If it makes you feel better, I'll probably never watch another game there either, but it has nothing to do with the Coliseum.
I like this comment from Archer, though. He's Tom, going years that end in 4. Probably.
There you go. Yeah, so this year you'd be good. 2022. Do not go watch them play in 2 years.
Yeah, exactly.
That is for sure. Here's an interesting comment. 10 Day says those bacon wrapped hot dogs after the USC games are the best thing about the Coliseum. I've never had one of those. I never knew that was a thing.
Yeah, neither did I.
I've been to the Coliseum twice for games. Twice, yes. I was there in 2014 and 2016. I didn't know that was a thing. So I'm blaming 10 Day that he didn't tell me that beforehand. I know he probably had no clue I was back in 2016, but I'm still holding him responsible for not telling me about this before. I may have to have whoever covers the game this year maybe bring me one of those back or something like that. That sounds phenomenal. Or I just make one. But that sounds phenomenal. I dig that very, very much. Very, very much. So, Vince, I think here we go. We got one last question, I believe.
Yep. It's from Kramer Highlights. Hello from San Diego. Welcome. Question.
Where my wife is from, by the way.
Well, a lot
up in Escondido.
Has been on Notre Dame's future. What realistic expectations can we expect from Notre Dame this season, being year one in the Coach Freeman year? We actually did a show about
That's what I was going to say. Kramer, I would encourage you to listen to yesterday's show. And I think we did a great job of diving into that. We agree or disagree. We had some comments from fans and other type of different things that I thought was very much enjoyable. So I would encourage you to check that out. But I think the one thing you're going to see a far more competitive football team this year, just how they go about their business on a daily basis. And I think that is going to be a big thing for me. Jules has a comment. He goes, I'm from Phoenix. I've been to all Fiesta Bowls since 1990s, and we have been destroyed in all games. I need a win. Yeah, I'm with you. Well, they weren't destroyed in all those games because they weren't destroyed this past January 1st in the Fiesta Bowl.
First half
and he's young, right? So the 1989 Fiesta Bowl turned out to be all right. Last time Notre Dame won a national championship. I have been in that stadium because that used to be played. I believe that used to be played in Tempe, where Arizona State plays. Correct?
Yeah, I think so.
And I was at the Notre Dame Arizona State game in 2014, so that was pretty cool. So yeah, I've been very fortunate to this job has taken me a lot of places to see some pretty cool games.
I'm pretty jealous of those spots too.
A&M's another one. I wouldn't mind seeing a game there just to see that. But it's not in my top list. It's just as I'm thinking of games Notre Dame's going to play in the next decade. That's why I think it'd be kind of cool. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So there you go.
Still looking forward to that brand new Vegas stadium, man. the shine is still
It's
on
either going to be really cool or
too much.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because all the teams that I follow are in old stadiums, right? The Cubs, 1914. The Notre Dame Stadium, old. The Bears, old. Like I've never really been to the most brand new stadium I've ever been to is in Detroit, and that's not that new. You know what I mean? And so I am excited about it to see if I like a new stadium. It looks cool on TV, but let's see what all the bells.
I think Jerry World's kind of a cool place. Like the game we went to in Arizona. I mean, I if you remember, Vince obviously was at that game, so Vince got to cover that game. But I was in the stands, and I purposely got in the upper deck, but I got front row, like at midfield. Remember the seats I sent you? And I'm like, man, it's like that's one thing I love about the new stadiums is the best place to be in a lot of these is like up front of the top deck.
Yeah, right.
Because the view is so good.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that. So that was a lot of fun.
I will say that it was just so strange that it was I'm just not used to dome stadiums.
And the angle from where you sat during the game is not ideal.
Oh, in the corner.
Yeah. That's where I sat in 15 because when I got my dad Fiesta Bowl tickets in 2015, I could only afford one. So I covered the game and I sent him. But I was fortunate to be able to take him and my nephew this year. So it's the first time my nephew had ever not spent, the night at my parents' house or his parents' house. That was a lot of fun. He had so much fun. We were climbing. There's this. Did you see that big hill right by the hotel? Had this the amphitheater, but then it was on the rocks. We went up there and we went. I sent you a picture of when I was we're in the go-karts and Vince I had the go-kart helmet. I sent Vince a picture. He's like, what in the heck is that? I forgot to tell him where I was.
There was no context.
I got kidnapped. They're taking me to space. Elon Musk kidnapped me, sending me to Mars.
What are you doing?
Yeah. That was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. So anyway, that's going to do it. Vince, why don't you go ahead and take us out of here, buddy?
Yes. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell because you never know when there's going to be an additional show. Share with your friends, share alike. If you're listening to us on the podcast, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. And I'm going to say it all again because Mace always puts it in.
We got 6 o'clock tonight. IB Nation
Sports Talk. Sports Talk. Make sure you check that out. Join the IB message board, hit the like, subscribe, notification bell, share this podcast, and leave a 5-star review. Visit the IB store for the best merch. And as always, go Irish.
Thanks for being with us, everybody.
Mailbag tomorrow. Woo woo.